I would like to invite Elizabeth Kaiser to the stage. Elizabeth Kaiser graduated from Boulder High School and CU Boulder, but she's from Montana. And her Paul actually farm a highly intensive no-till ecological farm in Sebastopol, California. And this small but mighty vegetable farm grows over 100 different crops year-round on 3 acres, a third of which goes to their 130-member CSA, and the remainder that goes to various farmers markets, restaurants, and a food hub. So Elizabeth's here to talk about throwing out that typical tillage-intensive organic vegetable production system and the benefits that she's witnessed to their entire ecosystem at their farm. So please help me in welcoming Elizabeth to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a busy year, and I was just thrilled to get this invitation to come out to Boulder. And loved seeing how many vegetable producers and how many producers and soil enthusiasts and everything there are. So let's see. There we go. Okay. So they have me down for 2 presentations today. I'm really thrilled. This one, we're going to go a little bit into the history of our farm and how it was that we transitioned to no-till. I'm also going to spend a fair amount of time talking about the why of what we do. And I get that often people get very antsy. They want to know the how. How is it that you seed? How is it that how do you mulch? Like how you do all of these things. So please hold all of that off to the second presentation. So we're going to talk a little bit about the science, some of the science coming out of our farm in this first presentation, and a little bit of climate resilience. So where we are, this is the majority of our fields. We are on an 8.5 acre property, but our actual field space is 2.25 acres. So we're pretty tiny. And this is most of it. We're down in a valley bottom. We're in Sebastopol, California, which is wine country. It's an hour and a half north of San Francisco. So you're thinking California farmer out here talking in Colorado, what is this all about? Honestly, it's about soil. My husband and I, we met in West Africa. We started farming in the Sahel of West Africa, and we have a lot of our crew. We actually have 2 of our ex-crew in the audience today, which is exciting. Whoop, whoop. Going all over from Tucson, Arizona to Japan to Australia to Chicago, using these same principles. So please believe me, the principles are the same. The climate and the soil and the people are a little bit different. This picture here is actually the end of October. We do farm year-round. I know not everybody can do that, but last Friday morning it was 18 degrees down in our fields. So we do definitely get a couple of frosts, not like here in Colorado, but we do get some frosts. So let's get started, I think. Just some of the numbers, some of these were already stated. So our field space is 2.25 acres. People like the dollar value. We produce $170,000 of revenue off of per acre. I think the write-up that you guys had said 150, and with so much inflation, that's gone up tremendously. So that's our 2022 number. We have a lot of people to do this. So on that 2.25 acres, we have 6 to 9 employees. I see that as a good thing, not a bad thing. We want to employ people. We want people working in the soil. We want people on a small piece of land that's near the community that they want to live. And then Lauren gave us, where our food goes. What we're really proud of is 98% of our food goes to the end consumer within 15 miles of our food. So our farm didn't always look like that picture that you saw there. We started off doing tillage. We've been on our property for 15 years. We're in a valley bottom. Most of our property is a sandy loam. The bottom gets down into a little bit of a loam and actually floods in the winter when we have rain. So we were doing a lot of tillage. We were not very productive. I was the off-farm income for the first 6 years as we were, getting things up and running. And we had tremendous pests. We didn't use any sprays except for our second year. We used an organic spray, and it was just, it was against everything that we wanted. We had tremendous weed pressure. It was really challenging. So I'm just sort of going to do a little bit of back and forths. This is also early Singing Frogs Farm. You can see there's some cover crops coming out. It's early spring, things going in. And this is what it looks like today. This picture is actually from 3 or 4 years ago, but you can see permanent roadways, permanent beds, things constantly going in. This is with early March. The background that brought us to that is a little bit different than many people going into farming. My degree from CU Boulder was in health sciences and anthropology, and then I went off to the Peace Corps. I met my now husband, Paul, who is in the other picture there. He was doing agroforestry and agriculture, and I was doing public health, but we were in very small farming communities. I was working with women. This was a women's project, and also older ladies that were doing vegetable growing to bring nutrients into the community. So when we got to farming, this was our first farm, our last year there. We started an agroforestry demonstration farm. It was about a ½ hectare or 1 acre with lots of different trees, and it's still there today. We check it out on Google Maps. So when we got to the farm, we were trying to do what was best, and the prior farm owners, passed on to us a couple of tractors, and so we were putting in cover crops, going to organic conferences, like how are we going to grow vegetables? We want to start a CSA, so forth and so on. And this is what it would look like. This was February 2008, and then that's the same view that you're having of that area there. You can see how much more is able to go in there. This is 2008 also, some of our lower fields, middle fields 7 and 5. We wanted to start breaking things up with that agroforestry background. So we first, before we put in any hedgerow, we got RCD funding to put in 3,000 Sonoma County native pollinator-friendly plants. That really helped us jumpstart things. And several years later, that's what it was looking like. Another before picture and after picture. So I think you get the idea. Not quite so productive and super, super productive. So what is it that made us make the change? There were really 3 things, and the first one was ecological, and this is why I put these pictures on here. Tilling the soil. We have many, many, many stories, but one of them is about a killdeer where my husband was driving a tractor and finishing tilling in the spring, and all of a sudden he sees a little killdeer. It's a plover, and they do a little broken arm dance to try to lure you away from their eggs. They're ground nesting birds, so you can see the eggs over on the right. This picture is actually from a bird in one of our permanent beds. You can see a cauliflower plant right behind her this spring, and she hatched her eggs in the middle of our productive crops. This was last April. But he was on his tractor and saw that bird and was just, I cannot plow down, this bird's nest. So that year, when we were still doing tillage, we had a little eye-shaped island in the middle of that field where the bird's nest had been. Because when we moved on the property, one of the first things we started doing was planting windbreaks, planting hedgerows, and I'm going to talk about that in the second presentation a little bit, really trying to bring in life, both above ground and below ground. And then here we were doing this tillage. There was another time when my husband was tilling a field, and I had my son, who's now 15, was on my hip as a baby, and I had to talk to him about a phone call or something like that. And he's like, hold on, honey, just let me finish this pass. And he was finishing the pass, making it look just beautiful and nice. And then he stopped the tractor and got off and started walking, and I was just observing this whole field. And what I was noticing is my dog, who was sitting next to me, dove down into the field. A farm cat from the other side dove in. 5 crows dove in. A raptor dove in. It was just, we had killed and brought up all of this life and just created this buffet of death for them. So it was it was about 2 or 3 different things that happened that were just like, we cannot do this. And we had the background of having worked in communities that didn't have access to tractors. And so we knew that we could do that. The second one was economic. We live in Sonoma County. Our property taxes are $20,000 a year. And we had to pay those. And I was the on-farm income, and that was great. But we were, okay, we need to grow more vegetables if we're going to do this. We need to pay, we need to pay our property taxes. We need to make a living. And that really drove a lot of innovation on our farm, that need to pay the property taxes, need to make a living in Sonoma County. And so we were constantly pushing the bounds of our seasons. Can we get in there earlier to get in an early crop? Can we, stay in there later? Well, we have a Mediterranean climate, so we have rain in the winter, and so you can't drive a tractor in the winter. And we kept trying, and we'd get tractor 1 stuck, and then have to pull it out with tractor 2, and so forth and so on. And so it was finally like, what if we just remove the tractors from this equation? We can get in there with our feet. And so we had one winter where it was like, we had these nice beds that were made, we took out our crops. What if we just ran a rototiller and then we were just in there with our feet? We can do that in the winter. We can determine when it's wet. Oh, it's too wet right now. Let's see if we can just throw some compost on top. So it was really trial and error and stepping down tillage from tractor tillage to a big old rototiller to a little tilther to something called a broad fork to nothing. And it was really towards that end phase as we were like in the little mini tilther when we were starting to go to conferences, went to a International Ag and Climate Change Conference at UC Davis and started to put together the carbon and the soil health pieces going, wow, we're seeing that this works for us and we can grow more food, but it's also better for the soil. And I skipped over the last one, social labor. That year before we did start to go year round and therefore remove the tractor from our fields and therefore start to go no-till, we had an excellent employee. But if we had done what we'd done the prior 3 years of till everything under, put in winter cover crops, he would have lost his job. He told us he was going to move down to Santa Cruz and he probably wouldn't come back the next year, which meant that we would have to retrain him and not have him back. Well, what if we just kept farming over the winter? Oh, I'd love to stay. And so we said, great, just another reason. So it was really a whole schmattering. Yes, it was a cute little killdeer, but it was also making a living, and it was also the soil health, and it was also labor. So in that time, you can just see what our soil looks like. You can see what it looked like back there, and then you can see what it looks like these days. And our soil organic, oops, the slide says through 2020. It still looks that way, I promise. Soil organic matter, when we first started, was 2.2 to 2.4%, depending on the field. And these days, it's 8 to 11%. And that's at a 6 to 12 inch depth. And then it says the soil carbon, because soil organic matter is 57% carbon. So here's a little video. This was done last year, sort of showing you the property starting up at the barn and our nursery area and just sort of moving down in the fields. And this is a May view. You can see that every single bed has something happening in it. Every single bed has green photosynthesizing plants. There are some areas where there is a block of a crop and some areas where it's only 1 or 2 beds. We also have hoop houses. About 10% of our beds are under hoops for season extension. That definitely helps us go through the winter, but also we're a cold valley bottom, so that helps us in the summer. We cannot bring eggplant or peppers to fruition outside. You can see our neighbor is a conventional vineyard, 140 acres. It used to be Chardonnay. They tore it all out this winter. It is going to be so much dust. So we're actually, this what we call green wall, our windbreak against them. We're actually planting more plants in there. They're going to have a lot of dust for the next few years. So looking at our soil organic matter at different depths, you can see partially why we don't test at the top. That's 6 to 12 inch level. That's where we're really wanting to go. And we did do some tests early on, so it's showing what that was early on and then what it is now, going down to 36 inches. So our soil organic matter at 36 inches is what it was when we first started out. We've been a part of a couple of studies recently. This one was from an organization we have in California called CAF, Community Alliance with Family Farms, and UC Berkeley. And they originally wanted to go through 6 different intensive no-till farms. It whittled down to only 2 of us. And what they did is over 3 years, they came out and tested our soil. And for us, they did our oldest no-till farm field, because we didn't change over the entire farm in 1 year. It took 3 years. And then the newest, and then we had a control. And then we had some friends of ours who are up in the Sierra foothills, and they had started out veggie farming their first year. They didn't entirely believe us, so they did tillage and half no-till. They started in March, and they were brand new farmers. The tillage plot brought them in $9,000, and the no-till, same acreage, brought in $36,000. And so the next year, guess what? They transitioned entirely over to no-till. And then as they got better, they bought a piece of property. So the other study was looking at them. I think it's how many years old? Age. It's like 1.5 years, 2.5 years, and 4 years that theirs are. And so what you can see at this is it's, sorry, my glasses aren't working. Oh, look at that. Okay, great. And so this is really that top soil. This is the one that I really like looking at. And I think it's really fun because you've got, so Hillview Farm Control, Hillview Farm No-Till, Singing Frogs Farm Control, No-Till 1, which is our newest field and our oldest. And you can see these really nice curves. The curve here is even better. Wait. Sorry. I just. Oh, no. Here. Okay. So this curve is really nice. So what it essentially is showing is the longer that you're spending doing no-till, the more carbon that you're accumulating in the soil, which is what we want to see even at the deeper level. They also found that we have 60 tons of carbon per hectare, which is pretty phenomenal. We're excited about that. And I've had a lot of people over the years go, well, but great, a lot of your carbon has got to be labor. Like, the biology is using, the plants are using it. If you stopped, it would probably just volatilize. They found that the majority of our carbon, and these are, was stable. And we were just thrilled with that information. So taking a step back and just sort of tillage in general, you guys have all seen this quote, right? USDA, tilling the soil is the equivalent of an earthquake, a hurricane, tornado, and forest fire occurring simultaneously to the world of soil organisms. Simply stated, tillage is bad. And I love that this comes from the USDA. And when I describe, what's happening to tillage, it's really that. You're breaking up those aggregates. It's total ecosystem destruction. It's just, we can't envision it because the world of soil biology is so strange. These are some tests we did 2 summers ago. What it's going to show is what's called a slake test, which is where you put some soil in water to test the aggregation. So this is our next door neighbor, and you're going to see these 2 soil tests are taken 100 feet apart. So the same soil type. This is what our soil was like when we were tilling. Sometimes it's fun to take our crew over there because they cannot believe it. So this is late July. This is a fall cauliflower crop. You can see how much easier it is to push that shovel in there. And then the slake test, the 2 different soil samples, when you put it in water, the soil biology, ours has already been in the water. A lot of slake tests, they do it sort of at the top. We entirely submerged it. Check out what's happening to the tilled soil from next door. So the soil biology is exuding supermolecules, glomalin and many others, the purpose of which is to hold particles of soil together to create that ecosystem within which they can thrive, right? And so when you put it in water, those supermolecules are still holding it together in the sample on the right. The sample on the left, we can sit here and watch, and we actually just let it sit for 2 days and it just turned into a pile of silt at the bottom of the jar, versus the one on the right basically stayed the way it was. The water turned slightly brown. You got a little bit of nutrients out of the water is all that happened. So this is what we want to see in our soils. We want to see those aggregates. We want to see the biology holding itself together and being super active. We also want to see the carbon in the soil, right? The carbon in the soil is going to help us with our water. With, for every 1 percentage point increase in soil organic matter, they say that, an acre of land can hold 20,000 gallons additional of water. Now take my 2¼ acres and my increase in soil organic matter from 2 to 8 to just be conservative. And how many extra gallons of water is that we are able to hold? Can I tell you how that helps us with our irrigation? When we were doing tillage, we had to do, irrigation for 50 minutes every other night in the summertime. These days, it's 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes if we have a heat wave, every 3 to 5 days. So half to a quarter of the same amount of water. I'm not going to go through this entire one, or actually it shows it here. We also did water infiltration tests. This is done with a soil scientist whose name, actually, I guess he's just more of a no-till specialist, Ray Archuleta. He was doing these with us. So this is showing how fast that water is infiltrating. We did this for a study I'm going to talk about shortly. We did it on the neighbor plot. Oh, well, I screwed that up. We did it on the neighbor plot. It took 24 minutes to get in an inch of water. We did it on another friends of ours who had similar soil type about a few miles away from us. They also grow vegetables, but they do tillage, they're organic. And then we did it on our own place. There were, what does it say, 8 minutes? And ours was 54 seconds, which is equivalent to a forest floor. So that means that with climate chaos, we know that if we have rain, it often is going to come in much bigger deluges. But if the soil can hold it and it can infiltrate, I have a video, I should have put it in here. It's on our Instagram somewhere. We had a flood last winter in October, and I went down into the land where it was flooding, and I had, big tall boots on and so forth. And it was phenomenal. The ground I was standing on was bubbling. It was just blub, 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 and it was just infiltrating. It was beautiful to see. Soil biology tests. These are some PLFA tests. From some of the areas. I'm not going to talk to the people at the soil test. We have high soil biology. These tests were done as part of some nutrient density studies, which I'm really excited about because I think there are many ways that we can push people towards regenerative. Unfortunately, I was talking to a rancher from the Midwest, and they sell regenerative beef, and he said he polled all of his customers, why is it that you are buying our food? And the number one reason was for their own health. For the ecology was down there, and then, animal rights was down there, but it was absolutely for people's health. We are selfish, and I hate that. I want everybody to turn over to regenerative agriculture for the ecosystem services and all of that, but the truth of the matter is that's not going to have enough of a move. But if we can start telling people it's healthier for you, I believe that that's going to help us quite a lot. So we were excited. I've talked about this with quite a while, but we were excited when we were reached out to by David Montgomery and Ann Bickley. They wrote this book, What Your Food Ate. It came out this past June. I recommend it. They went to many different regenerative farmers, wheat, soy, corn, legumes, and vegetables. They came to us and another farm in Vermont for the vegetables, and what we did is we grew out a crop of cabbage. That other farm that I had on the infiltration test, they grew out cabbage too. We grew it from the same seed packet. We did soil tests at both of our places, and then we sent in the cabbage after it was grown to a lab to test it. Well, these were our results. This is how much more of all of these nutrients our cabbage had than our friend's cabbage. Where it really shone was the polysterols and so forth, all of the micronutrients, all of the carotenoids and so forth. Those are what we're really starting to find are really helping our immune system. Well, guess what? They're helping the plant's immune system as well, right? And then they also just took some of our spinach and carrots and put it in against USDA. And in terms of the phytochemicals and polysterols, it was 100 to 400% higher than what they were finding in the grocery store. Now, our soil organic matter and our soil health score, they used a Haney test. Our soil organic matter was 550% higher than the other farm that we used, and the soil health was 370% higher. So I love this because we need data to start to show that. And there have been a few studies in the recent past that have actually done things to show like conventional produce is more nutrient dense than organic, which we hate to hear, and it just we know in our essence that it isn't right. But if you have organic, but it's in that same conventional view where it's input and you're still using sprays and you're still using, everything, it's the same system. It's really the regenerative that breaks it out of there. And they also told me something that I thought was very interesting. They said that actually some of the conventional produce they tested was very high on the macronutrients, but then entirely lacking on the micronutrients. Well, guess what it is? It's the fertilizer you put in, right? Goes straight to it. But anyhow, I'm talking about this too much, but you can tell I'm excited about it. Okay. These are the principles of soil health. They're ubiquitous. I don't care if you're in Colorado or if you're in California or wherever you are. My husband and I actually did a really fun presentation with a guy named Gabe Brown, who's a regenerative rancher in the Dakotas. And we used these and talked about principle 1 on 3,000 acres, of legumes and cattle in the Dakotas, on 3 acres of vegetables in Northern California. The exact same principles, but manifest in different ways depending upon where we were, what our crops were, and so forth and so on. So I'm actually going to go through them bit by bit. Disturb the soil as little as possible. We just talked about why we don't want to do tillage, right? We don't want the soil on the left. We want the soil on the right. We don't want to disturb all of the life, the earthworms and so forth. So going quick over that, keep living plants in the soil as often as possible, right? We want that photosynthesis. This is from Dr. Christy Jones. Your photosynthesis, you're going to take the carbon off of the CO2 in the atmosphere. You're going to create glucose, your most basic carbon-based compound that is then resynthesized into a myriad of different sugars and amino acids and everything from there. And then, depending on the plant, depending on the season and how healthy it is, anywhere from 20 to up to 60% of those carbon-based products are exuded into the soil to feed the soil biology. And there you have the humification, the building of the soil biology. Love the slide. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. This is in a Petri dish showing a root hair exuding out sugars to feed the biology. That's what's happening in our soil, and we want to have that continue because of all the relationships that are going to come back from the biology, building up this food web. So we do that, keeping green photosynthesizing plants in the ground as often as possible by having 3 to 9 sequential economic crops in every bed on our farm over the 12 months. And sometimes we'll have multiple crops in one of those sequential crops. I'll talk about that soon. And if we can't get a crop in our lower fields where we flood, we will put a cover crop down there, a non-economic cover crop. But if we can, we're just going to continue growing vegetables. Grow as many different species of plants as practical. We want to mimic this as much as possible. Our prairies and our native flowers that were in California are different than the ones here, but it's the same idea. It was this amazing community of different organisms, all exuding, all feeding the soil and so forth. So as much as possible, we want to exude that. We want to have as much crop diversity as possible. And honestly, that helps our bottom line too. Because I can tell you, we have 60 different varieties of vegetables, and then we also have flower production, another 60 different varieties there. I will tell you, we have a good couple crop failures every year. But with that many crops, it doesn't matter because we've got economic resilience. This one fails because of the heat wave or the, who knows what, but that one is going to thrive. We will also do a lot of multi-cropping wherever we can. And so what you end up having here is you end up having, this is a cauliflower, and the spacing of it is 2 lines every 24 inches, and that is as close as we can get those plants. That's 100% crop cover. Well, we've just put in lettuce, which normally, if I only planted that lettuce, it's a large head lettuce, it would be 3 lines every 12 inches. I got a 60% cover of that lettuce there. So I'm getting 1.6 crops out of this bed at the exact same time. Meanwhile, so let's see what that looks like. So you can see on the right here, once you harvest out the lettuce, that's what it's going to look. You're going to harvest the lettuce just as the brassica is closing canopy. And meanwhile, the quicker crop, the lettuce, is suppressing weeds. It's maintaining moisture in the soil. Heck, it's photosynthesizing and feeding the soil, right? And you get an extra crop to feed your community and, make money. So we'll do this as much as possible, not over the winter, there's not quite enough sunlight. The quick crop will not do well, but here you can see it with leeks and an upright crop. We really look at the architecture of the plants there. A brassica going up and over like this, so we'll choose a wide open lettuce head, or here you can see leeks, so there's an upright little mini romaine, or we might do some baby bok choy or something like that. Tomatoes going in, they're going every 2 feet, and they're these little sprigs when you first put them in. So we'll get 1, maybe 2 large crops. Here you've got some escarole and frisee, there you've got a good lettuce crop on the sides. Now I told you we don't do cover crops, but sometimes we'll mix our cover crops in. So this is a fava seeded at the same time that we transplanted this broccoli. So we're growing something entirely different, and then guess what? I harvest my fava and sell it. I sell it once it's 18 inches tall as a beautiful light green. It goes out through our CSA. We have a restaurant that loves putting it on a vegetarian taco. And so I'm getting an economic crop while also getting a nitrogen fixing crop in that bed, and then I still have 100% of the broccoli crop. So you can see how it's intensification. There's an old adage, the farmer's footstep is the best fertilizer, right? Well, we have really, really high farmer footstep on our farm, I can tell you, with 6 to 9 full-time employees on 2¼ acres. So another intercrop that we've really gotten to love, this is actually a flower, it's status, and in between we've got some green onions. We plant the green onions as an intercrop all year long. One of the problems we have late winter is songbirds will eat a lot of our lettuces and our brassicas, they'll just nip at them. You plant an onion in them, they don't like the smell of it. So it keeps the birds away, and we're getting another crop out of there. How are we doing for time? Okay. Adding flowers into our farm has been tremendous. Not only are they very different families, and so very different root structures and different things they bring a lot of above ground structure. So in the summer, some of them almost work as windbreaks. You're bringing in pollinators, you're bringing in beauty. You also make a little bit more money off of flowers. So over the past 4 or 5 years, we've really built the flower aspect of our farm. We sell them through the exact same markets. It's just one more product, and so it brings more people to you. And at this point, it's about 15% of the revenue coming out of the fields. And they're beautiful. So also crop diversity and more things in the field. Perennials. Now, obviously, you can't move a perennial around, but having them as close as possible. So here you see some perennials on the bed rows. You also see behind them perennial hedgerows, like that one also. Keeping the soil covered all the time, ideally with green photosynthesizing plants, right? Now, we do have a very artificial system where we're taking out an annual crop and then we've got bare soil and putting in new ones. We recognize that. And sometimes we will have artificial covers on our soil. This is occultation over the winter. Those beds we didn't have anything in. We can't plant anything over the Persephone period where you have fewer than 10 hours of light per day. So they're waiting for late January, early February, and then we're gonna peel those off. So there's no plants photosynthesizing and feeding the soil, but we've got increased decomposition, and it increases the soil temperature a little bit so that in early February when we plant, it's just gorgeous and there are no weeds. Also, if we do direct seeding, we're going to artificially cover the soil. This is a burlap, and it really helps keep the homeostasis, keeping it moist and not too dry, and so forth, and helps with our germination. And then mulch, straw mulch. That is something that we'll utilize when it's appropriate throughout the season. So you can see this drone shot of this field here, how many different kinds of soil cover you're seeing there. Everything from straw mulch to plastic to just green photosynthesizing plants. Now, the last principle, incorporating animals, is something that for many years I sort of danced around, because we're not gonna let a herd of cattle wander through our fields. They destroy it. Not even chickens. And we even tried ducks, but it was a mess. And never mind, the river otters ate the ducks. So, I was giving a farm tour and talking to somebody in regenerative ag, and I was sort of getting to this, and I said, yeah, we bring in manure into our compost, but and she literally hit me with a stick, and she's like, Elizabeth, you just spent 20 minutes telling me about how you're increasing biology, how you have all these hedgerows, all of the life that you're bringing in. And so the animals that we incorporate are not grazers, But I can tell you, it is a cacophony on our farm of birds, of raptors, of, unfortunately, rodent pests, of predators. We have coyotes and bobcats and an occasional mountain lion. We have animals on the farm. It's the hedgerows that bring those in, our snakes keeping, things in control. We love our snakes. They're big, big helps for us. We have an amazing number of songbirds. We have native bees. We have our ponds. We have crawdads and turtles that will sometimes come out into the fields. And then we bring manure. About a quarter of our compost pile comes from manure. And we see that as an important way of bringing animals back into our farm. So that's how we, utilize the principles of soil management on our property with what we grow in Northern California on our soil. And honestly, I just believe life improves the capacity of the environment to sustain life. So if we have problems like how can we bring in beneficial life, we'll often get, asked questions, be it, do you sterilize things in the nursery? No, I would rather not fight the negative biology. I would rather promote the beneficial biology. So Singing Frogs Farm, we're really soil focused, no-till, intensive. The more intensive you can be, the better, right? Because you've got more young plants photosynthesizing into the ground. One of the things that I often tell people who are starting out is bite off far less than you think that you can chew and do it well. Because if I'm gonna start with, a whole acre, and then some of it gets out of control and it gets weedy and then it's not utilized, you're actually going backwards, and then you're going to have to deal with those issues. So do it right, start off, get things figured out, and then grow from there. Okay, and we have till 9:15, is that right, Lauren?
Yeah, maybe 9:20, so 9:10, and then questions for 10.
Okay, great. Great. Also wanted to talk about what we all have to deal with. On the car ride over here this morning, we were talking about drought, right? We've got a changing climate, and we often don't know what's coming. And as we've gone along in sort of talking about, our regenerative practices, we've gone from let's sequester the carbon, get it out of the atmosphere, reverse things, to, okay, let's please still try that, to we've got this climate chaos. We need to deal with it. Well, guess what? Having healthy soil, biologically active soil, high carbon soil is the absolute best thing for dealing with climate chaos. And I just wanted to give a couple of examples here. This basically says what I just said. And above and beyond that, flexibility. The flexibility in managing a system, and we're all out there. We know what it's like to work with Mother Nature. You've got to change on a dime sometimes. But the flexibility is super important, and the connection with our community. So smoke. What you've got in this picture is a day when we had a fire nearby, and we've got people, not for COVID reasons, this is pre-COVID, wearing masks because the air is unhealthy. We have a whole set of, when can people work outside, when can they not work outside, and since this time we've actually become a little bit more cautious. This was one of our first fires in the area. But guess who else is affected badly by the smoke? It's not only our own lungs. The plants actually, when there's high levels of, I believe it's a sulfur dioxide, they close their stomata. So they stop breathing. Therefore, they stop photosynthesizing, right? So they've got to make it through this time. So the stronger of an immune system, the stronger of a soil biology that they're able to pull from, the better they will make it through those crises. And hopefully we don't have smoke for too long. But the smoke was catastrophic for us. So we, in Northern California, thankfully we're in an area where between a laguna and the ocean, so the chance of a fire for us is, that was louder than I meant, is much less than a lot of other people, but it's still definitely there. We live in a fire ecology. I lost my train. we need to be ready for it. Oh, but when we have the smoke, we often also have other things happening at the same time because it's blocking out the sunlight. We had one year where we had frosts down into the high teens, and then it didn't heat up because usually when we have frost, it's because it's clear skies, and then the sun comes out and it heats it up in the morning. Well, we had this smoke cover, the sunlight couldn't come through, and it was cold until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So that was really, really hard on the plants. And we made it through. Floods. I don't know how well you can see this, but this is looking down our property, and it's a little bit of a mess because it's in a storm, and so a lot of the blankets and so forth are all strewn. But this is looking down, I think it was actually after the storm. And that's how high the water gets on our property. So we lose a quarter to a fifth of our fields to floods. Of the 15 winters that we've been there, 11 of them we've had floods like this. So that's a bit of a challenge to farm in, right? And so like I said, the fields down here over the winter will get winter cover crops, and then we'll terminate them in the springtime. So they only might have 2 to 4 economic crops, a total of 3 to 5 still. But it's definitely a challenge. And having that soil structure from the aggregation allows it so that the water can come up, the water can go down, the irrigation lines and, things like that all get tossed around. But basically the crops come out unscathed, if there are crops under there. We have to wait 120 days. So for this beet crop, it was able to make it. But that's definitely something that we have to deal with. And, we could have more floods. We have those, big storms, and, we don't have any rain, and all of a sudden it dumps a ton. Well, we've got a lot of infiltration on our property, but we're in the bottom of a valley, so we collect the rainwater from many more acres. So we also have to deal with the flood aspect of it. And then, not directly climate chaos, some people say it is, but another kind of chaos being COVID. How many of you found that your customers were much more excited about your products as a result of COVID? So I threw this in here. It's a little bit different, but bear with me. We're going to have these times of uncertainty, and being able to grow food and being able to flex is tremendously important. We want to shorten our food chain, and that's what people found in order to have healthy communities. We don't want to be bringing things in from very far. This is a slide that I like bringing up. It's a little old at this point. Outside of the United States, there are a lot more small farmers. We think of large farms. And I love this because this looks at larger scale industrial versus small farms. Now, there's some things that need to be on a larger scale than 2 1/4 acre. I get that. Grain production, some ranching and so forth. This does take that somewhat into consideration. In terms of acreage, I think it was 5 acres is what defined a smallholder here. But look at the number of seed varieties produced. Look at the percentage of women farmers, double. Look at the calories obtained for the calories expended. Most of these are fossil fuel calories, right? Look at the natural resources used, and look at the amount of food produced. So much of our world's food is produced by small shareholders. This is outside of the United States and including the United States. So this has really shaken things up, and you can guess the industrial ag did not like this so much. So over the past couple of years, there's been a couple of studies showing that this was not actually the case, and it's really only 40%. And I dug down into those a couple of months ago. And it's a very interesting debate. They unfortunately only used European countries. They didn't use African and Asian countries, which a lot of those are going to have smaller areas. That was part of it. And they also had instead of 5 acres, they did 2 acres or 3 acres or something like that. And yet I still say that if small farms are producing only 40% of the world on, much less of the world's land and with fewer resources, that's still a good thing. So, just in case you hear naysayers. Wanted to end with that again and see if there were any questions.
All right, so that Slido website is where you're going to put in your questions for Elizabeth, and we'll project them on the screen as we get them approved. So we have about, I think, like 15 minutes for questions, so we will try to get as many answered as possible. One of the most important questions I've seen so far is, where did breakfast come from? And it's dry storage, which is just down the road by the Peloton apartment complex, 38th, 33rd, and Arapahoe, something like that. Okay.
And Lauren, you know what? I actually realized your 10 minutes was until Q&A, not including Q&A. I have more I can do.
Do we want more? The people want more.
The people want more? Colin, can you put it back on? Great.
Cool.
When I was putting together, because I have a presentation this afternoon, I realized the afternoon presentation was really long, so I was ready to start in on that right now. So let's do that. And I'm going to start talking about, I've alluded to a couple of times, like hedgerows and perennials and ecosystem services on our farm. And on our farm, when we moved on 15 years ago, literally the very first thing that we did is we planted a hedgerow. Okay, we at the beginning or the end? Enhancing ecosystem services. Okay. I'm great. So get big or get out. This is something that we fought a lot when we were first, speaking about it, and, people wanted to bring us into a conference, and they're like, we cannot bring in a 2-acre, production farm. And one of the things that I still bring in when people do that is, okay, so look at the revenue we're bringing in. We are producing the same as a 30-acre vegetable farm. Oh, okay, well that's a little bit different, because now you're, at least getting into mid-scale and so forth. But on the other side, get big or get out has really, let's get rid of everything except for our cash crop, and has lost so tremendously much. So California slide, but you can see here, there's no, within the farming area, not in the hills, there's really no ecosystem services. You've got a crop growing right to the edge of the field, and then you've got, a tractor road, a truck road, and then you've got the next fields. For us, we want to be growing food within a landscape, within an ecology. So, you definitely need to think about, what are your contextual factors? Are you in California or Colorado? What is your desired outcomes? For us, we wanted windbreaks. We want a spray break against our neighbor, the conventional vineyard. And what ecosystem services are appropriate for the farm. For us, pest control, honestly, is a huge one. Insect pest control. Here's a video. So this is 3 years old. My kids are now taller than me. And what it's going to do is go down the property. And I'm going to sort of point out as we go down the property with my pointer here. The dog here is running after the drone. Oh, thank you. Does this work? Yeah, great. Okay. So as we're coming by, we've got our barns and our house and things like that. Boom, here's hedgerow number 1. This is the one we put in 15 years ago. You've got plantings, perennial plantings along the edge there. You've got another native planting along there. You've got fruit trees along the north edge there. You've got some new plantings there. We've got our big, what we call the green wall, breaking us up from our prevailing winds from over there, as well as our conventional neighbor. We've got a native planting there, a native planting there, a native planting there. These are some of our seasonal ponds, native plantings all around them. Prior owners put in redwoods. That definitely helps against the wind. Also provides a lot of shade, which we don't necessarily care. And then a lot of native plantings around here, trees. So mostly what we really like are those smaller hedgerows that are going to be between 3 and 8 feet in size. And here another overhead shot where you can just see, they're bisecting all of the fields, not so much there, but here and here. And that's just tremendously important for us. So some of the ecosystem services that we want out of our perennials, we want food. As we've gone along, I said we got an NRCS grant up early to put in Sonoma County natives. We're not getting a lot of food off of those, but we've started incorporating a lot of fruit trees. I visited an orchardist once who did a line of taller fruit trees and then a hedgerow literally in the row that they kept pruned down. And I just thought that was genius. So we have one area where we're trying to do that more recently. Windbreaks. We actually 3 weeks ago just put in a new windbreak because we had an area where we didn't think it was an issue, and with the climate change, our winds are actually changing. We're having a lot more winds from the north. Those are the chaotic winds. Those are the ones that bring our fires and so forth. And unfortunately, we have our biggest hoop house there, so it's getting slammed. So we went out and bought a bunch of trees and we just designed a new one after 15 years of building them, right? So things are always changing. Also soil building. They're going to be reaching deeper. They're definitely going to be adding a lot to even in the field beds. Water retention, biological diversity, pest management, and aesthetics. Let me just talk a little bit about the pest management. Insect pests are weird. Insects are weird. They're so bizarre. It's bizarrer than science fiction. But I like to break it down for people into predators and prey. And people can think about mammals a lot easier. So I think about it like coyotes and bunny rabbits, because we can all envision that. So an aphid or a cucumber beetle or something like that, let's call it an aphid, that's your bunny rabbit. They're small, they produce a lot of progeny very rapidly, they have a shorter lifespan, and they don't need much space to live in. I can have many families of bunny rabbits living on my property. The aphids are going to live on the lettuce or chard that they're going to be eating, right? Versus a coyote has a longer lifespan, fewer progeny, less frequently, and needs much more wild space. I'd need many of my farm to have enough habitat for a coyote family, right? Well, the beneficial insects are just the same. While the aphids are going to live on the crops, the aphids are born pregnant. They only live for about a month, right? All of these things, it sort of matches up with your bunny rabbit. Now, take a lady beetle or a wasp or something like that. Much longer lifespan. They need some protective habitat. The lady beetles love deer grass, for instance, or there's a lot of research showing that a bushy perennial is going to be where your beneficial insects are going to want to reside. Now, they're going to travel just after this I'll be done. They're going to travel out into your fields. Some studies show up to 500 feet to go hunting. We've said, well, the 500 feet they're not going to get to quite so much. So we've designed our farm so that we have hedgerows that those beneficial insects are going to like within 125 feet of every single annual crop on our farm. And that has brought our pests down to be, they're there, but we also need food for the beneficials such that they are not a problem for our crops. Let's get back to this afternoon, but hopefully that'll sort of start you thinking in that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start question and answer now. Colin, if you want to pull up the moderated questions. If you really cannot get the website to work, we did include Post-it notes on your table, but that means I'm going to come back and try to help you with your phone later. So anyway, our first question, which I'll just read. Do you have a published resource / guide, your own or another author?
We have not published anything. We have a website that I tried last winter to build it and put a lot on, and this winter I'm going to try and take some more time and put more on. Jesse Frost, I think, is a really, really good resource. He's a farmer, I think, in Tennessee, and he started a podcast called No-Till Growers. He did that for 2 years. He's now stopped, and it's been taken on by various other people, like Clara Coleman, Elliot Coleman's daughter, does a winter farming podcast, and there's a compost podcast. He also has a book. Somebody help me out with the name of the book. Jesse Frost is his name. It's Soil Health Handbook, or Living Soil Handbook, I think is what it is. Mm-hmm. It's tremendous. It's a lot of the same ideas that we're talking about here. We've collaborated with him a lot. It's actually, I talked about how much I love interplanting. He's got an amazing appendix of different things and how they work in different interplants. So I definitely recommend that. There's also a lot of good stuff on market gardening, be it J.M. Fortier's work or Connor Creekmore. I would just say they love tools and they still love their tilthing, and so they don't necessarily have the regenerative part of it, but it matches together very well. As long as you have it in your head, like, don't need to do the tilthing, don't need to do the power harrowing, that sort of thing. I would say that those can also be really good resources. But there's so many podcasts out right now that are helpful.
Great, thank you. What have you found to be the most important, I guess, thing in scaling your farm, bringing on more labor and still retaining your core principles and goals?
What was the first part of it? What in scaling up?
Yeah. So what have you found to be most important in scaling up on your farm, bringing in labor, and retaining your core principles and values?
Great. Honestly, scaling up, we often get asked, "Oh, you're doing such a great job, and you're doing that on 2¼ acres. Let's do it on 200 acres." That's how our economy works, and that's how people think. I don't think that way. I think of scaling up as, let's train a whole bunch of people to do this on everything from 1/4 acre to 5 acres. And so that's how I see scaling up happening. And so how I do that is, well, I'm standing right here talking to you right now. That's one of the ways. Doing workshops, having people, come out to see our farm. And honestly, a lot of the people that we hire them because they want to come work for us for a year or two, learn, and then start their own thing. So that's how I see the scaling up. That's not what the person had in mind when they asked. In terms of labor, my labor issues are a little bit different because I have people who want to come and learn as part of labor. Of course, people are the most complicated part of any organization. And so it's working with who you have and what their positive sides are. You have somebody who really wants to start a flower aspect to the farm? Guess what? You start flowers. You have people who are not as interested in farmers markets. You maybe, stretch into other areas a little bit. So it's really working with the people around you. I hope I answered that well enough.
Okay, great. One more thing. If we could have our exhibitors start to line up, because we'll be doing the intros after we finish Q&A. So our next question is the $170,000 revenue gross or net?
So that is revenue. So that is gross. Thank you. And I meant to actually say that when I was talking. What is our profit? I aim to have our profit about 0. I pay myself. That is one of our expenses. But honestly, if we can pay the people a living wage that work on our farm, and if we can pay our property taxes, that's what I want to be doing. I don't want to be having a profit. So I hope that that's helpful. We're in the black. We're making it. And I aim to have our profit a little bit over 0 so that I can have, a safety count. Oh, they're up there.
Yeah. What criteria do you use in sourcing your manure in order to stay organic and not introduce problems?
I have one guy I get our manure from. You've got to know your farmer, right? That's what we tell our customers, right? Know your farmer. I've got to know my farmer too. We brought in manure from my husband's father once, and he had changed his feed sources, and there were clopyralids in it, and it ruined a field of ours. So we only get horse manure. I would love to get other sources of manure. I've got a chicken coop and I put a little bit in there, but it doesn't really count. And we do that because we know the guy, he grows his own feed, he's very thoughtful about it, and so forth. So we don't take any manure. And if, I wouldn't take a lot of horse or cattle manure if I didn't really know what they were using as feeds and so forth, because there can be some herbicides that will live for up to 4 years, including through the digestive tract, including through a hot compost pile, and still kill the plants out in your field. What would you do for a typical rotation of 3 to 5 crops per year? So I'm actually going to talk about crop planning in the second section a little bit. Can I hold on and just talk about it better later? I'm sorry.
Yep, there's a bunch of questions kind of about cropping and more specific, really in depth. So we can hold those, or you can re-ask them for the afternoon session where they might make a little bit more sense.
And I might just answer them.
Yeah, and you can answer them then too. Okay.
With so many FTEs, what are your net profits or your personal salaries, and where are those FTEs housed? Okay, great. You want to know what my personal salary is? Wow, you guys are diving deep. It's changed over the last couple of years. 8 years ago, it was 72K, and since then I've had to make some changes. That was farm-based. I've had to make some changes because my husband has a chronic illness and isn't farming, and so I've had to do some other things, honestly, like consulting. And so that's not coming out of the field, and so I don't think it's applicable to say that. But let's say in 2015, that's what it was. Where are the FTEs housed? We have housing for 3 people on our property, and those people get paid a little bit less just to make things fair. Other people are in the community. I like to have sort of a balance of people who have relationships within the community, and then people who are coming from outside of the area, and those are more likely to be in our on-farm housing. And we built that housing just a few years ago as the cost of housing in our area went astronomical. How much do you pay employees? So here's the interesting thing is when we were starting off, we were paying people starting rates of $9 an hour, and our starting rate for somebody without much experience right now is 18. So that's been a huge challenge because a bunch of carrots has not doubled in price either. And so that's required us to be a little bit innovative, shall we say. Yeah. What role have you had in your community in terms of engagement with neighbors, sparking their interest in this kind of intensification? I am not actively going to go out to my neighbors. You know, sometimes I'll give a farm tour and I'll talk about how one of our main insect pests that we don't have the ecosystem services to balance are flea beetles. And the reason for that is our county has 60,000 acres of wine grapes, and they often do a winter cover crop that includes a lot of mustards, and flea beetles will overwinter in mustards. And so my 140-acre neighbor will till or mow that all under in 1 week in April. Guess where all those flea beetles are going? You know, I grow a lot of mustard family, you know, bok choys and Napa cabbages and mustards and, you know, things like that. They all come right over to us, and we don't have the biology to quite balance that equation. And so I have a lot of people going, well, why don't you just go talk to them? And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. How would you take it if I come over and say, so you're doing this production and I think it's all wrong. This is what I think you should do. It's not going to work that way. So, you know, I like to talk to the people who are interested and, you know, just show up with this is what we are doing, and think that that's how we're going to meet people, you know, when and if they are ready. But we do talk a lot in our community, and I was going to say this in the second section, but I'll say it right now. The reason that I'm here today is marketing for selling our produce. We started off by talking to our CSA members about the beets and how you might want to prepare those beets, but also what we're doing on our farm. And why don't you come and bring your kids out to the farm and let's talk about our practices. Wow, that's really great. You know, can we bring this nonprofit here locally? Oh yeah, let's have this. Can you come and speak? And all of those started off from a marketing, oh, let's write an article in the newspaper. Great, because that's great for your CSA signups or your people coming to your booth at the farmer's market. And I've come to realize it was really that marketing our vegetables which ended me up here on this podium today. That wasn't entirely the question. Is there another question up there? Yeah, okay. Yay, thank you guys.